This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 986, recorded on Wednesday, September 11th, 2024. Have we learned anything? I don't know. I hope I have. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight we will fill your heads with self-conscious fish, sperm stress, and see-through skin. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Science started in the stars. The Milky Way galaxy in which our solar system is spinning was on full display each night. Before the first hypothesis, before the logic, the language, or methods of mathematics, we had the movement and motion of the stars. A nightly mystery that even today can inspire wonder and curiosity. The first science was naturally one of astronomy, of using our knowledge of the stars as a compass through time, hunting for the order of the universe with a predictability that followed the seasons. In the thousands of years since, the mystery of the motion of the stars has been solved. The scale of our universe growing from a planet to a solar system, from a solar system to a galaxy, from a galaxy to billions of galaxies in an ever-expanding space-time. And as much as we have discovered, as much as we have understood, large mysteries remain yet unsolved. Some of the most familiar and simplest sounding questions linger, like why gravity exists, how life got started, and why some people can't seem to get enough of This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again to talk about all the science from the past week. And this day in particular in the United States is a historic day of change. And every time a Wednesday or a show day falls on September 11th, I remember years back in Davis, California, getting up in the morning from the floor of Greg Yen's house to go to do TWIS early in the morning and not understanding what was going on and piecing things together. And our world has come a long way since then, for better or for worse. Regardless, I hope that we are in the process of learning lessons that will take us to a stronger future for all humanity, a better future. And science is a good thing for pushing boundaries, making people uncomfortable, and getting to that better future eventually. Oh my goodness. It is Wednesday. Everyone, this is the show. I have stories about a recent SpaceX launch yesterday, bats saving babies, see-through skin, yay, food dye, eggs and sperm, and cravings and consciousness. What do you have for us, Justin?
I've got Welcome Home Starliner excitement, peer review, fraud detection, an isolated Neanderthal news, very interesting Neander news story, and crackpot physics published in Astroparticle Physics Journal.
Crackpot physics. That sounds crackpot. That's what I said, isn't it?
I hope so.
Didn't enunciate well. Oh, that's not what is in the animal corner. What did you bring for us, Blair?
Oh my goodness. I have a dinner bell. I have Alan, and I have a mirror.
Did you And this is in
Is it a
the
fish?
dining
Is it a
room
fishy
forgot how to
with
do
story?
Colonel
this thing.
Mustard.
Is
Yeah,
it a
I think
fishy
I
story with the
forgot
mirror?
how this works. Yeah. Well, you just have to wait and find out.
Well, I want to know if it's the fishy
We're
story.
gonna have to talk to Alan about this, though. Who invited Alan? Oh my gosh. We love the Alan updates. Everyone, if you are not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, make sure that you are on our YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook channels where we broadcast live weekly Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Pacific time-ish. And we look forward to seeing you in our chat rooms. Hit those notification bells and buzzers to make sure that you're able to join us live every week. If not, you can always time shift us. And we have an edited podcast that helps to get rid of all the blurbs and blarbs and whatevers. And that's a podcast. So you can find us all places podcasts are found. Our website is TWIS.org. That's where show notes and other cool things are for all the cool kids. Look forward to seeing you there. Okay, everybody, you ready to dive in? Let's
Yeah, sure.
go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Space. I like diving in from outside the planet. So there's a story that Justin's gonna talk about that he mentioned, but I want to talk about the Polaris Dawn mission. This is the first private space mission on SpaceX, paid for by a billionaire who is on the Polaris mission currently, heading. Well, it is in orbit around our planet. It's the furthest orbit ever reached by humans since the Gemini missions in the 60s. I mean, the Apollo missions went further, but that was to the moon and other stuff. So that was kind of different. This is the first time a woman has orbited this far from the planet, which is very
So the
exciting.
billionaire was a woman? Plot twist.
No, the billionaire is a man, but there are women on the mission, and
He brought an entourage.
One female SpaceX woman will be spacewalking at this location. So hopefully tomorrow. They have been reducing the nitrogen content of their blood through depressurization, increasing oxygen, depressurizing the cabin they're doing it for about 45 hours. Really, really slow depressurization to make it nice and easy. And the whole cabin is good. They're going to let there's going to be nothing in there. Space is going to be inside and out. This seems like not a feature. This seems like not.
well,
they're going to open the door and it's going to be like, space. It's already here.
That's the only way to get the spacewalk done. Is everyone doing the spacewalk?
Yeah, okay, because I was going to say
two people will remain in the space shuttle. Well, this not shuttle. It is the capsule, the SpaceX capsule. Two people will remain in it, making sure everything's okay. Everybody will be wearing spacesuits.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're worried about
the billionaire is doing the spacewalk, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yes.
From inside, though. From inside?
Nope. From inside to outside. Inside to outside. Okay. So two astronauts, not the billionaire astronaut and a SpaceX astronaut, they're going to take turns going in and out and twisting around and showing off their nice new fancy spacesuits that have been developed over the last couple of years as new designs for spacesuits to protect astronauts in space. So, this is very exciting. Do we know who
this billionaire is?
His name is Jared Isaacman. And Jared Isaacman, he made a bunch of tech money, but he has been very, very dedicated to private and this new space mission. He went on one of SpaceX's first tourist launches, loved it, and reserved 3 flights on the Dragon capsule with Elon Musk, and has been invested in developing these spacesuits. And so he's pushing the new space field forward with his investment. He has been very, very quiet about how much money it's costing him. And when asked how much, he says he refuses to say in a pre-flight news conference, according to Phys.org. He's the founder of a credit card processing company, Shift4. And when asked to say how much he invested, he said, "Not a chance."
Okay.
Okay. So
Interesting.
here's the thing, and I know I'm not supposed to rant because it's my short show.
Short
But,
show.
like, as much as billionaires in space gets under my skin for every, like, we go as a people, as a nation, the whole NASA missions, the sort of collective effort of our tax dollars going to space and all this sort of thing. Well, usually what happens when government leads and innovates is it is then taken over by private. Anyway, like, this is also the history of all these cool, neat things we've discovered through what is, like, the classic example? Corningware. We have Corningware because of
Velcro,
NASA.
spam, like so many
Velcro,
things.
I think, Velcro was a Dutch hiker. Figured that one out. But still, and then the internet. Well, that was actually part of CERN's technological infrastructure, and that they invented the internet to get data to researchers far away, and then it expands and expands and becomes. So there's some aspect of this is the natural progression of NASA's space missions, is that private industry at some point takes that knowledge created by government and utilizes it for things like this.
This, though, is very interesting because these are, while it is affiliated loosely with NASA, this is private. This is SpaceX, a private company, launching a privately funded mission with SpaceX astronauts. These are not NASA astronauts. These are SpaceX astronauts. They are, they've all gone through rigorous training. They all went through the billionaire included, every single one of them went through a very long period of very intense training to make sure that they are ready for this mission. And it's not a half-cocked kind of thing. It's fully cocked. It is a fully prepared mission. And this is it's private, 100%. And that, I feel, is I think, except for maybe the launch location, I'm not sure of that, but I think it's very interesting because, like you said, government has began this, but it came from military, right? All of the NASA stuff originated from military missiles.
Yeah, rockets
missile
were
technology.
not designed for space travel. Rockets were designed for murdering people.
And we've also
far
had
away.
This has, so many missions and efforts have been public-private partnerships, and NASA is going to be turning more and more into a project manager, partnering with more and more private influence. So I feel like this is going to continue, and it may even develop into a mostly private endeavor at some point, which I think
and
is,
again, like we've talked
its
about,
own
the
conundrum.
like the internet started as a government funded communication thing for researchers, right?
Yeah, but somebody has to make those the internet cables. Where do they go? Who puts them down? Who pays for that?
And the other part of it too is, like, if it didn't privatize, the government version of it today would still suck. It would be terrible.
Yeah.
It would be. It really just. It would be. And I'm not. I
have to say, though, JPL and Goddard, there are some amazing, amazing scientists and engineers who have fully envisioned and engineered missions to Mars, missions to Venus, like Cassini. Those aren't private. Those are public money. Those are government money. Those are educational institution money. Those are grants. The rockets that they're launched on, Boeing, ULA, which actually is like connected to Boeing. They're all connected in some way, but where do the parts come from? Private companies. Where does everything, where does it originate?
But it also
the innovation engine.
Owners of the project are profit driven. There are different decisions made than when something is public. So there's, as you said, there are pros and cons. Like, profits can drive innovation, but profits can also drive cost cutting. Yes. And profits can also drive stakeholders having an unusual amount of say in decisions that are made.
Yeah, so we'll take this now to the next story, which is Justin's story,
which is to say
which is
also
related to this.
Just because it's privatized doesn't mean it's better.
No.
First of all, welcome home, uncrewed Starliner spacecraft.
Yay, did anybody else watch it? I watched the whole thing. Yeah, it was cool. They had night vision, infrared cameras. It was super cool.
So the astronauts could have come home, is what
well. So NASA and Boeing worked together to safely return this uncrewed spacecraft. They're concluding what NASA is now calling a 3-month flight test to the International Space Station. In reality, the capsule experienced helium leaks, which reduced its ability to transfer fuel to the propulsion system, resulting in several of its thrusters failing to operate properly. Engineers at Boeing and NASA spent the 3-month test flight trying to understand why things were not working, with Boeing representatives optimistically claiming the problem would be solved and that it was safe to return the astronauts. But the troubleshooting was eventually abandoned by NASA, and the Starliner deemed too risky to bring the astronauts home. While the Starliner returned in one piece, like you say, Blair, it still didn't go as planned. There were thruster failures, even getting the automated capsule into the position for re-entry. So, yes, it made it back, but boy, it would have been a nail biter, and there would have been a lot of second guessing at the level of risk that those astronauts were put through. Now, I know everyone out there knows at least one person who is overly optimistic about everything to the point of exhausting everyone around them. If you don't know such a person who is overly optimistic about everything, chances are you are that person. Here's another. Ken Bowersox, Associate Administrator, Space Operations Mission Directorate at NASA headquarters in Washington. I'm extremely proud of the work our collective team put into this entire flight test. We are pleased to see Starliner's safe return. Even though it was necessary to return the spacecraft uncrewed, NASA and Boeing learned an incredible amount about Starliner in the most extreme environment possible. NASA looks forward to our continued work with the Boeing team to proceed towards certification of Starliner for crew rotation missions to the space station. So they may have learned quite a bit, but the thing that they really needed to study was those thruster units that kept failing. And unfortunately, those did not return. Those detach before reentry. So we're not going to get a look at the thing that was the problem. A press briefing panel on the return consisted only of NASA officials. While the future of Starliner certainly is now looking bleak, you will not hear that from Boeing representatives, because 2 Boeing representatives who were supposed to be on the panel chose not to attend. Maybe they weren't as overly optimistic as Ken Bowersox, and maybe that lack of optimism is actually what Boeing needs right now. Because everything that I've seen all the way through this is Boeing's been yes-manning. You know what that is? Like,
but
oh, we've got it. Oh, we're confident. Oh, we're sure. Here's our marketing lead. Like, this is the problem. NASA administrators are terrible communicators. They're just awful.
Actually, yes, but I heard administrators, but the project manager after this mission came back, he said some really wonderful stuff. He was very transparent about the whole thing. And when asked by reporters if he thought they should have had the astronauts on it because it had come back in one piece, he said, I think we're all I don't think so, but I think, we're all going to have a bunch of emotions to work through. I'm going to have to work through a bunch of emotions here. I feel like that is actually a very honest response.
Yes.
However, Boeing in the press thingy afterwards, they were like, we should have put the astronauts on it. It was fine. It was great. When
And
it
that was, I
wasn't,
think, that
because
was an
another
internal note to their employees.
Yeah,
Where they're keeping
another
up.
thruster was not activated on the way back, and they had a blackout for part of the return programming, so that nobody was able to see what was happening outside of the time frame in which it was expected for there to be a blackout. So there were things that went wrong still, and they were down by like half of their thrusters because they had to like turn off 12 of them because they'd gone bad on the way up. So there's a whole bunch of reasons. Yeah.
But here's the intersection that I want to highlight.
Yes.
NASA administrators are terrible at communication. They're terrible at communication because they are, in a way, focused on the marketing of government funding and putting a positive spin on absolutely everything. And if they're working together with representatives from a company who are always engaged in stock price marketing, company impression, brand management, you have two brand managers taking the lead and giving the public information about a scenario. Meanwhile, we are witnessing a reality where this thing just isn't working. And I think it's a bad combination to have, at least out front of the public. I appreciate the honesty of the, some of the, and I've seen quotes from I don't have his name up here, but one of the managers for the project, who was being, yes, like you say, very direct, answering questions, not doing the brand management shtick. But when you've got a combination of corporate brand management and sort of
government
NASA administrators being terrible at communicating in the first place and just trying to say the inspiring thing about anything.
It's not the inspiring thing. I mean, this is the situation. They could not have everybody was watching. They could not have another Challenger situation. Even though there was no teacher on board and these were test pilots, people were watching. And so this was not something that NASA could do. And Boeing wanted to push forward on it because they need their profits. They have a bottom line. And they're losing money on this. So there are opposing interests, as Blair mentioned earlier. And the whole thing, I'm glad it came back. It showed that there was a lot still working. They're going to be able to get a whole bunch of data out of everything that they're looking at as a result of the reentry and the landing. And maybe Starliner will return to space. Maybe it won't. But at this point, everything is moving forward as we thought. It's just and nobody's dead. It's great.
I assume they're going to continue to do some test flights, but my prediction: unmanned.
Yeah. Well,
they're going to go from a manned test flight to an unmanned one.
Another one. Yeah.
They're going to go backwards a step in the whole.
Yeah, and a great question.
Smart.
Yeah, they might go back. Yeah, because if they have to rebuild anything, they kind of have to start over a little bit.
Meanwhile, SpaceX will continue to show astronauts, crew, and equipment back and forth to wherever we want them to.
Fingers crossed it all keeps going smoothly. I'm going to be keeping an eye out to find out how Polaris's spacewalk does tomorrow, because we've got new spacesuits. We've got a never before done kind of spacewalk from the Dragon capsule. And it's really far out, man. So we've got some really fun things to be looking forward to tomorrow. And also there's a new mission that launched today, I think, or supposed to, going up to the ISS with some new astronauts up there. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. It's very exciting. Blair, let's move from outer space. What are you've got a sad look upon your face.
Inner space. No, I'm just thinking. No, the opposite of outer space, the deep sea.
Yes.
So scientists wanted to study some fish and instead made an elephant seal dinner bell. So they yep. So researchers wanted a camera down at the bottom of the ocean that was going to use sonar to locate fish, and then they were going to see how different lights or sounds might impact fish behavior. And instead, they created an elephant seal dinner bell.
Oh, wow.
So, and every time it got turned on, it was like, toot toot, fish are here,
What's
come
that?
and
What's
eat.
that?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. So over the
Oh.
course of 2 years, they had about 8 elephant seal males ages 4 to 7 regularly coming on camera. They found the hydrophones that were installed there, and this is 645 meters deep. And
Whoa.
yeah, it just, I mean, there's not really much more to this story other than oopsies. They associated the sonar noise from the research instrument with the presence of food. And so that was the sablefish that were being attracted there to be studied. So it's a accidental discovery. They were able to observe elephant seal behavior. They actually saw some of them taking speed naps, power naps for the first time ever at the bottom of the ocean. So they got some cool data out of it, but oops, they got a lot of fish eaten that they were trying to study.
We wanted to study you, but you were eaten. But so the question is, do the fish ever learn that if they go there, they'll get eaten? So there's no learning because the fish are dead and not going back to tell anybody else.
Right.
There's a reward going to the seals, sea lions. And I don't know, it's kind of like bycatch or researchers, they take animals for research purposes every once in a while. And this was probably supposed to be observational, but just call it an unintended consequence.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. But I think that's why I found this interesting is, as we always say, ecological spaces do not live in a vacuum. They're all connected. And so if you have a marine mammal that's very smart and you're installing an instrument that attracts fish, you're going to have some, as you said, unintended consequences. So they kind of completely changed their research. They went from studying sablefish to studying elephant seals. Got some cool behaviors, didn't really find anything too unusual, I would say, but it did provide some interesting data for future elephant seal studies. But yeah, a total pivot, a total change in their study plan.
Well, and it just makes sense in retrospect, I guess, right? It's like, yeah, I left a bunch of breadcrumbs all over the ground at the park so I could study ants. And all these darn pigeons showed up. What?
Exactly. Yep.
I love some of this footage you're showing though. This is so great. You're just like,
I think it's
I mean, the whole point of this study was to see the effect of light and bait on fish and invertebrates in this canyon.
Yeah.
So that's what they were doing. They were baiting the fish. They were trying to attract them to the space where the camera was. So of course, elephant seals go, ooh,
hey, yum.
Yeah.
I'm hungry. I can wait for a meal. I know how to use light.
Clever mammals. I love them.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. Things in the ocean aren't clever. What? I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Blair. Don't give me that look.
Like what? That's where all the cephalopods live.
Oh my goodness.
They're smarter than us.
They really are. Tool users unite. Okay, moving on in the stories away from the fish feeding bar. Let's talk about fungi. They're all around us. Oh, and as it's getting hotter, I mean, there was that one TV show that everybody was talking about this last year. It's like, oh no, I forget what it's called, but it's like the fungus. It gets in everybody, and then there's zombies.
Last of Us.
Last of Us. I never watched it, so I'm just going on what everybody said. But the idea is that it gets hotter, climate change, it makes more convenient, enjoyable environments for more and more fungal species. And oh no, poor people and other animals, everything's going to die because the funguses are going to eat them. The funguses are going to proliferate because hot and it's going to be great. Anyway, some researchers were like, let's put that to the test. And in a species of plant, they wanted to find out whether or not high temperatures actually led to this issue of fungal dominance. And in this particular study in ecology from the Ecological Society of America, they found that high temperatures reduce growth, infection, and transmission of naturally occurring fungal plant pathogens. So they only looked at one particular herbaceous plant, Silene latifolia, and one fungal pathogen, Mycobotrium lichnitis dioeciae, which is a smut disease. It's a plant smut disease. The plant smut didn't like the heat, and they found that it liked to and was more successful in infecting more of the plants in the spring and the fall than in the summer when it was hotter. Temperatures went up, the smut went down. Temperatures went down, the smut went up. Now, I don't know if this is related to moisture at all, because it probably is more than just one factor. But bottom line, in this one very tiny little situation, we can take a positive home. High temperatures, bad for someone, fungus. But the plant did great. The plants did great. They were doing great in higher temperatures. So that's good. Go, Blair.
But isn't there a concern that if the higher temperatures, the fungus can't grow on plants, that it will evolve to jump host?
No, I'm not concerned about that. No, I am concerned. No, why would I? Why?
Well, just because if it happens gradually enough, right? Like if the temperature increase was extremely drastic, extremely fast, then yes, perhaps it just won't. Maybe it'll just do poorly. But if it's a gradual enough change, then there's the opportunity for them to move. The fungus can move to a different locale. The fungus can change the timing of how it kind of breeds and spreads, or it could change where it lives.
And like we will probably find, so if the fungus really is, if the fungus is really good at, I don't know, liking a particular temperature range, maybe it'll stay in a certain area and not move around. And the plants will move, but the fungus won't. Or maybe it won't evolve to enjoy higher temperatures. Maybe it won't evolve to enjoy different species. I'm trying to remember.
I think the idea with The Last of Us, and I'm sure everyone's going to yell at me in the comments now if I don't get this exactly right, but I think the idea was that this fungus evolved to live in a warmer body than it had done before because of climate change, and therefore it could jump to the human body, because before it was living in like in plants or animals that had lower kind of like body temperatures, if that's the right way to talk about it. Mm-hmm. But then because it evolved to get into a warmer space, it could jump to humans. Mm-hmm. So this could follow that. I'm not trying to say zombies are coming, but that's what I'm saying is like
zombies are.
I'm not taking good things here.
Then no, I'm just saying, I think it's actually a really interesting idea for a horror, science fiction, or whatever you want to call it, type of fiction, because it does follow some logic to how this could work.
Yeah.
There's another thing that's going to come into play at some point. With following that track, what you're saying, where they can kind of adjust to surviving different temperatures, whatever. There's an interplay in the soil between bacteria and fungi. Ongoing, billions of years long struggle, arms race, fighting back and forth for dominance of the earth itself. Small e. As temperature changes, you can see some falling out of the race because the temperature is too hot. And if that's a fungi here or bacteria over there, the landscape can massively alter. What is there to do that competition? And because plants rely on certain bacteria or certain fungi, or in many cases also soil viruses, which may be the least affected by this, might see the greatest benefit. So it's actually a kind of a three-way race going on over there. So aside from just what any individual change happens in a fungi or a bacteria as these temperatures rise, the entire ecosystem under our feet can go through a very radical change that would have almost immediate impacts on all the plant life that is growing in any given location. This is one of those weird things when you see an invasive plant, a plant that's really taking over an area that it hadn't been before. A lot of times what's coming with it is actually the soil is altering as the plant expands. The microorganisms underneath are actually changing as well. So
there's a lot of change.
Interesting time to be studying the dirt.
If we thought everything was just the way it was for a long time, we're just like, just so stories, haha, joke's on you. It's not just so anymore. And your study's going to be accurate for about a couple of years, maybe, and then things would change. Other fun things. So we know that bacteria and other fungi can hop a ride on aerosols from Africa and head over the Atlantic to hit the Caribbean. And we know that happens. Researchers like, where else does this happen in the world? So this last week, study published in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, researchers measured the troposphere, which is a large area, but what they call it the planetary boundary layer. And this varies over land. And this boundary layer that's like above the land and kind of what they're calling it the peplosphere. The peplosphere is this planetary boundary layer where air's behavior is influenced by the surface, turbulence, heat rising from the ground, etc. And so we got to go above that. So this peplo layer is about 3,000 feet, 1,000 to 3,000 meters above sea level. And it varies depending on where the land is. So if you've got a mountain, that peplosphere, the boundary layer is going up higher than if it's down below sea level or at sea level. Anyway, they looked at aerosols. They took air samples on a bunch of plane rides up into the peplosphere, this boundary area, and they found, lots of bacteria, lots of fungal species, pathogens also. Woohoo! It's great. 266 genera of fungal species, 305 bacterial genera over Japan and the Pacific. They found Deinococcus radiodurans and others that are known to like extreme environments, but also that when they tried to grow some of these things, a lot of them were dead, which is great, but some of them didn't die. And so some of these fungal pathogens could be hitching a ride from places where sewage water or stuff isn't treated well, and it goes to become fertilizer or gets put out into places where it aerosolizes. Maybe you've got cattle, or maybe you've got, like, what about this bird flu thing? Whatever, viruses, all sorts of things, hitching a ride on aerosols, going up into the troposphere, the plenary, the peplosphere, going up into the sky, hitching a ride on a high altitude wind current and making their way thousands of miles to other locations where they can drop down and potentially find a situation where they can change things. We don't know causation. We don't know if this actually happens, but it is something that these researchers are now interested in looking into. In this experiment, they found organisms they think were lifted from East Asia, specifically Northeast China, agricultural areas, and dropped over into the Japanese airspace. Not on purpose by any means, but anyway, fungi in the air. And so now let's talk about this one really interesting study from the last week. So Blair, you've talked a lot about white nose syndrome in bats over the last few years. Bats have been suffering from this fungus where, because of moisture and temperature changes, the bat colonies that roost in cave systems, when they hibernate over the colder seasons, they're breathing, and this fungus gets into their lungs and over their noses, and they have these white noses. Well, this can kill off an entire colony. So this researcher published, ILG Frank published in Science this last week, a study that he's worked on and batted around quite a lot to see if there were any other explanations. But it was like a natural experiment of like, hey, what happens when the bats go away and nobody's eating all the insects? Turns out about 1,300 more babies die in those areas every year than normally.
Baby humans?
Baby humans. White-nosed bats, white-nose syndrome kills bat colonies. In those areas, about 1,300 additional child deaths, baby deaths. Why is this? It is correlated with increased pesticide use by farmers.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Yeah, it's I was like, how do the insects become that much more potent? No, it's the humans.
It's the humans.
It's the humans that are doing it.
Bats are actually saving babies. And so if we can help keep the bats from having white nose syndrome by, really cleaning our shoes, not taking fungi into cave systems when we go caving, we can potentially help these bats that exist in these cave systems not to die out and to help humanity. It's also been shown that cicadas, when they emerge, there is a higher amount of pesticide application in those years of cicada emergence, the massive years of cicada emergence. There are higher numbers of more child mortality, and additionally, higher numbers of kids who throughout their life score lower on test scores and other measures of health, negative measures of health. So we also have, there's a number of pieces of evidence that come together on this. And it is unfortunate, like Mike Owens in the YouTube chat room is saying the headline on this in the media was terrible. And I think that's really true. It's unfortunate that they decided that the angle they decided to go with, but the bottom line is that we exist in this world with animals like bats that help to get rid of pests, the pests that prey on, that feed on our plants and our agriculture. They influence how we grow those crops. And that whole system influences our human health. And if there wasn't a reason to really start digging more deeply into the effects and impacts of the pesticides we use, I'd say that this is it.
Humans cannot survive on this planet alone.
Nope.
It's just so everyone's aware.
There was a study in June as well. I don't remember if Blair brought it or so. Vultures died in India. It led to like 500,000 deaths.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's no cleanup crew of dead things. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. But yes.
Yikes.
Bats save babies, everyone.
All praise the bat and the scavengers.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is, this researcher really said that they kicked the tires on this significantly to find out if there were other risk factors, socioeconomic factors, other explanations for why there might be the different health outcomes. And it was pretty much, this is a natural, randomized controlled trial designed by nature. Woohoo! Yeah, super fun stuff there. Justin, go on with your, or do you want to, who's next? Blair, no. Justin, who?
Well,
what's happening?
Okay. So
Justin has to go.
Yes. So Justin, tell a story.
I'm gonna flip around my stories just a little bit so that the order makes a little more sense. So I'm gonna talk about some Neander news. Neanderthal genomes have been collected throughout Europe and parts of Asia, and we have a pretty decent picture of Neanderthal genome in different regions at this point. One of the things that's sort of been indicated is that late European Neanderthals belonged to a single meta-population with no real significant evidence of a population structure or a whole lot of diversity even amongst them. Now, there's a discovery of a Neanderthal in Mediterranean France, nicknamed Thorin, after the, was it Tolkien character, one of the dwarfs? And this one's been kind of a puzzle because at the site that they were excavating, they had pinpointed the age of this Neanderthal fossil to 42,000 years ago, making it a very late surviving Neanderthal. When they looked at the genome, it looked more like 100,000-year-old Neanderthal. It had almost complete markers that showed it as being much more similar to Neanderthals that had lived, 50,000 years before the late Neanderthals. So they spent 7 years trying to figure out this puzzle. And what they eventually discovered was through isotope analysis of bones and teeth that they could tell that this Neanderthal lived in an ice age, which is where the late Neanderthals would have been. All of the rest of the archaeological data kept coming back. This is only like 50,000 years old. But the genome kept looking still like 100,000 years ago. What's wild about it is they have now come to the conclusion that this is an isolated group of Neanderthals that for 50,000 years did not interbreed at all with Neanderthals that would have been a 5-10 mile walk away.
It's so close.
For 50,000 years, you don't visit the next town.
Well, was there a glacier and a mountain in the way?
Yeah, no, it may just be that we know that there's like high levels of inbreeding in some Neanderthal populations. We know that they were small groups, but it may be that this is the origin of the introverts in modern society, or at least there were some real introverted Neanderthals who just didn't socialize with other Neanderthal groups. And I think this theory had sort of come up previously because one of the things that's also been noticed is there doesn't seem to be any Neanderthal wars. Neanderthals, when current modern humans move in, there's no evidence of current modern humans and Neanderthals fighting.
But I think we want to think about this in the sense of glaciation and the periods, the glacial periods coming down into the UK and the rest of Europe, and what land was frozen and just hard to access and who could be there. And Neanderthals were better at the cold temperatures than humans. And so Neanderthals hung out in those cold places when humans were like, I'm going to stay where it's nice by the ocean.
There's nothing Neanderthal-y. Neanderthal-y? Is that a thing?
Neanderthal.
There's nothing in Neanderthal physiology that makes them better at surviving cold temperatures. There's nothing. They don't have any. But this isn't Neanderthals and current modern human mixing. This is Neanderthal not mixing with other Neanderthals for 50,000 years. And they're just, and this would have been from the time, right? This actually would have extended back before the Ice Age. That's when that 100,000 years ago, things weren't Ice Age Europe. And then
I think that's the interesting question.
But this is what I was saying, though, is
they still didn't like each other.
Neanderthals had very small groups. They had higher rates of interbreeding than humans were seeing at the time. But also, there's no conflict seen between Neanderthal and Neanderthal groups. There's not conflict between when humans move in Neanderthals in terms of violence. But what we do see is that as soon as these extroverted humans start going out and exploring Europe, Neanderthals just move. They just kind of pick up and go somewhere else. So it's almost as though the survival strategy for Neanderthals that lasted hundreds of thousands of years was just, oh, there's other hominins. Well, we'll leave them alone. We'll go over here. They seem to have like a strategy of avoidance of other culture. I don't know if it was so much a xenophobia.
It's like me, or an avoidance of all going outside, going places. Yeah.
It's like they know. It's like other humans. Yeah, not for us. Yeah.
I'm good on the internet. Yeah, no. It's my Neanderthal heritage. I know. It's my ancestry. It's coming through.
And then I'm gonna jump 2 stories because they're gonna come quick.
Okay.
University of Seville researcher Maria Angelis Oído Garcia, I should have practiced that, began to look at peer reviews in journals that are published alongside their papers. Not all journals publish their peer reviews, which we'll get to in the next story. But she was surprised to see in looking through, sort of making a study of peer reviews, that a lot of generic phrases kept turning up. It says here, in abstract, the author should add more scientific findings, is like one of the examples, or discuss the novelty and clear application of the work in the abstract as well as in introduction section. So some of them were very sort of generic suggestions, but she ultimately identified 263 suspicious reviews prepared for 37 journals in multiple disciplines. And one reviewer has duplicated phrases exactly in 56 different reviews. So they're kind of
the idea that ChatGPT is reviewing these.
Not necessarily that ChatGPT is reviewing them, because this will date back to 2021.
I mean,
but
I was,
no,
I was being silly, but I meant a program, right? Yeah, so not,
or a template, or you've written one review, and now whenever you are hired to review again, you're like, oh, I'll just copy and paste this. I'll copy and paste this. So it looks a lot more like copy and paste, right? Because at least if you ask ChatGPT, it would probably come up with a different way of saying it every time. Right?
But there are artifacts, right? So like
there's artifacts and there'll be themes.
Use the same phrases very often. So that's what I was thinking.
But a lot of this looks like copy and paste. So
yeah,
in this age where we're concerned is being raised over citation fraud, where people are citing their own articles or their buddies' articles and back and forth and putting in citations in articles that don't belong there, or where the actual article itself is sort of manufactured and not based on science. We're now finding that the peer review process itself is, of course, not immune to.
But here's my question,
Absolutely
if
not.
I can just ask one little kind of prodding question about this. Are we sure that those same pieces of feedback that are being used over and over again aren't valid? Because I can just say, like,
a lot of people make the same mistakes.
Grade things, right? When I worked with teens, or in camps, or in school programs, or similarly now, if I'm reviewing, I do resume reviews at work all the time, and I'm helping people out building their resumes. Yeah. I write a lot of the same 5 words over and over and over again, and it's because people make the same mistakes over and over and over again. So that's my question, is like, how many of these times that they said the same thing over and over, was it valid?
Yeah, that's a fair point, because you can see the same problem likely multiple times.
Right. Yeah, like, are most people submitting articles for peer review around the same place in their journey through academia? And so they fall into a lot of the same pitfalls that require similar feedback. Do you have to say it different every time, or can you copy and paste the language that you used if they have the same problem?
Yeah. So it's a possible signal of fake peer reviews, but it doesn't mean that the peer review is fake. I totally agree.
Yeah.
They also discovered some cases where authors submitted manuscripts, suggested reviewers who would be familiar enough with the work to look through it, and those reviewers turned out not to be real people, but to have real email addresses that happened to be controlled by the authors who were submitting the manuscripts.
That's pretty damning.
That one's a little more like, okay,
cut and dry, I think.
But it's
I graded my own test. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
It's
review
really
my own
suggesting
paper.
that there is a need to get better at the peer review process. And I think, and I've said this before, I think all peer reviews need to be public. That papers should not be having peer reviews that are provided as feedback to the author and
which is
kept
why
separate from the publication.
Yeah, and which is why I like the open pre-publication databases, because it opens up the article and the work that's been done to commentary from the research community before you go to publish it. And while these papers have been taken and sensationalized and used in the media for different purposes, I think it's, the direction is a really good one, because it gives people the opportunity to have feedback before the paper even goes into peer review. So I don't know, but there are other ideas. Researchers are working to overhaul the system, and I don't know, hopefully at some point it'll all work out. Yeah. So anyway, researchers, peer review, difficult. There's some trouble. What else is happening with it, though?
Yeah, which brings me to the final story I've got for today, which is I first saw on the Sabine Hassenfelder YouTube channel where she talks about physics. And we've talked about this before. I agree with like 90% of what she's talking about. Kiki might not be.
She's really, really good at talking to people who think like her. She thinks she's an amazing science communicator. She's great at talking to people who have brains like her, but she is not a good general science communicator. And I'm just going to say it like that. I think, and so I really don't agree with her a lot, but it's science, so I don't have to.
And I really like her. Okay, but.
Okay. I like, she's open. She's actually open to debate about stuff, she's a scientist, which is good. But when she comes in and
I think I like her because she takes a lot of subject skeptically. She may have an opinion, but I feel like she's a good. No, I think she's a good skeptic. Anyway, don't necessarily agree with why she's being skeptical, but she's probably smarter than me anyway. She on her show, she tore apart this article called "On the Same Origin of Quantum Physics and General Relativity from Riemannian Geometry and Planck Scale Formalism," and basically this is something that was published in Astroparticle Physics by 4 real scientists, and everything from the terms they use to the mathematics, she goes through the first portion of the abstract, at least, and just tears it apart as being absolute nonsense. This is gobbledygook. This is stuff that looks like science, but basically, this paper would unify quantum with general relativity and have everything.
It's so many of it people have been trying to do for so long. Let's unify these theories. Let's unify them. The theory
unification of Einstein's field equation and quantum theory, and it's got it explains like how universes can be entangled in energy transfer between a black hole and a white hole, and all sorts of they go through. Basically, we figured everything out. It's kind of what this paper says. What's interesting about it is it was submitted to Astroparticle Physics. This is the part I'm going to get to here, where it was received on the 27th of June, 2024. It was accepted for publication on the 16th of August. So within a couple of months, this groundbreaking physics paper, which unified all of the mysteries of physics and broke tremendous new ground in the entanglement of black holes and multiple universes, it took a little over a month and a half to peer review and be accepted for publication. Now, I don't know who's running this here astroparticle physics. It's part of the Elsevier network of publications. But I have a feeling that peer review didn't. I would like to read it. Like, I would really like to read it. Now, this article gained some attention. If it had been on, if they'd said, remedying the geometry of Planck scale formalism, which are somewhat real and somewhat nonsense words. There's Planck scale formalism isn't a thing anybody's ever heard of. But if you had just named it that and left it in a little corner of this astroparticle physics journal, it could have gone unnoticed. It's like, what are these people talking about? Some fine aspect of geometry in a certain scenario.
And people are talking about it, except for us. And if you'll notice, I did not bring this story to discuss on This Week in Science because I just didn't even talk about it. That was my choice.
I think if they'd given it a more sort of obscure kind of a name, it could have potentially missed the radar of many readers, or many of the people who would be commenting on it. And it could have slipped through as more junk science. And, if you look into the authors of this, I noticed that some of them publish dozens of stories a year.
Which you can if you're a theoretical physicist.
Such a wide breadth. No.
Right. But if all you're doing is math and writing.
Right. But not always in theoretical physics. Mm-hmm. Like, they have like a pretty wide range of topics that they're writing papers on. So like everything is kind of super suspect there as well. But the reason I'm bringing it today is because now,
the peer review,
as of a couple of days ago, there has been a expression of concern has been made available and been tagged. So it now says that this expression of concern will remain is going. Okay, so here's the quote. This is a note of temporary expression of concern related to potential errors in the formulas of this paper. The concern in this note will remain appended to the above mentioned article until the investigation is closed and the decision is made regarding the article retraction or correction. You're going to have quite a big lot of correcting and retracting to do, to the point where the article might not exist at the end. But my curiosity now is I kind of want to track this.
Yeah. Find out what happens. Yeah.
Because I want to see.
It's not for us to decide. It's up for the physicists, the mathematicians, people who are knowledgeable in this area to really dig into it.
Up for us to decide.
You and me and Blair.
What are you talking about?
We're not deciding whether or not this paper.
No, this is not what I'm tracking. I don't know what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is.
What about you guys? I feel fine. I could decide.
I don't like it.
But I didn't say that. To be clear, just in case that was a misinterpretation of my verbalocity. So my curiosity is, this was received on the 27th of June and accepted the 16th of August of this year.
I want to see how long. Fast.
Huh?
That's really fast.
Yeah.
Acceptance.
I want to see how long.
2 weeks.
The note of temporary expression is concerned, but I want to see how long the investigation into the paper takes. Because
that's interesting. Yeah.
Because one of the things is there is the accelerated rate at which things are getting published accelerates the amount of money coming into these publications. The rate at which
you can pay for accelerated acceptance and peer review
is removed.
Yeah.
Seems to be much, much slower. Something that can get in months sometimes sits there for years before it's removed. I like this idea of putting the note there that's attached to this article, although you can still see the article without the note. You have to click into the note to see that expression of concern. So it's tagged in there, but it's not headlining it. Like, you don't have to find the article after the note. You find the article and then there's the note. Anyway, the curiosity is, without the financial incentive to publish, does that publishing integrity have an investigation that is faster or slower than the acceptance rate? That's what I'm curious about. So I'm going to see if I can remember to track that over time, but I'll probably forget. Because I also have
maybe people will remind you. Yes.
I got to go.
We'll keep it. Yes.
I got to go.
Have a
Enjoy the rest of the
wonderful
show,
train
everybody.
ride. Have a great day. Thank you for bringing us this question
I'll
of
see you next
validity
week.
and peer review.
I'll be back.
Awesome.
Maybe it'll already be peer review. Maybe they'll be done with their investigation by then.
Yeah.
I'll
No,
be
they
just
won't.
shocked. Actually, there might
no.
be enough publicity in this one that they actually do it and be like, look
Mm.
how quick we were on that one everyone knew about.
No.
Anyway,
Nope. No data was used for the research described in the article. That's pretty funny.
No data.
I didn't do data. Oh, expressing concerns. Let's do a couple more quick stories. Blair, have you ever wanted to like see through your skin? You know how you like do the thing where you put a flashlight on your hand or your finger so you can see the blood vessels. You do that with kids, like it's super fun. You're like, look, I have a flashlight. You can see my blood.
I mean,
It's
I
a
did
fun
grow up
game.
watching Slim Goodbody, so he's
such a weird unitard. Ugh.
Yeah, so you could pretend that was see-through skin.
Did you hear the story about see-through skin this week?
No.
Okay, common food additive in yellow dye number 5. Yes.
Number 5, yes. That's Mountain Dew, isn't it?
Yes. Like very common. FD&C yellow 5. It is used like in Cheetos, I think. You're going to find it all over the place. This yellow 5 has been used for a very, very long time. But now it has a new use. Researchers are making skin translucent with it. How, you might ask? The exciting aspect of this work is that they are using light and how light is refracted to be able to allow transparency. Our skin is not transparent because we have a lot of disorganized cells that bounce light around inside of it. And so light goes, we talk about like through the layers of the skin, how you can get like deeper skin damage by different like UV types of UV light that penetrate into lower, deeper layers within our skin. Well, part of that is that those frequencies are able to pass through those disorganized, or not disorganized, but irregularly organized cell types. But the light goes in, light gets refracted around, bounced around inside, and what we get coming out is kind of like our skin color. So you can't really see. You can kind of see through mine because I'm really pale and don't have a lot of melanin. But for a majority of people, your skin is not translucent. We are not zebrafish. We cannot see inside of ourselves. But using the application of this compound, it's in yellow dye, number 5, they are able to wipe it onto skin, shine light on it, and you can see basically through the skin. Your skin becomes translucent because the dye changes the gradient of diffraction. So the light comes onto the skin, is bounced differently, and it makes it through. So you can actually see through the skin. I mean, it's blurry. It's not super clear. It's awesome.
But so this
so
is
cool.
This is topical application. This is not through ingestion.
Nope, not through ingestion, injection, or anything that is internalizing. It's wiping it on the skin.
That's wild. So I had to look it up because I was wondering if this was just my childhood. But when I was in, I don't know, probably middle school, and Mountain Dew was like very popular, there was a rumor, there's an urban legend that yellow number 5 killed sperm. Like it impacted your sperm count.
I just remember the red dye being the one. You're not supposed to eat the one that's in the cherry lifesavers. I don't know. That one's bad for your behavior or something. But,
yeah. But so I had to look it up, and that was a common urban legend. Yes, that is real. That was not just my middle school. But that's why I think that's so funny that it's yellow number 5 in the end. That's turns out that Mountain Dew, you just gotta rub Mountain Dew all over your body and then you'll be invisible. No, that's not right. You'll be able to see your organs.
I mean, it's just amazing that these researchers are able to, understand how the dye solution interacts with the skin tissue underneath it in such a way that it scatters light differently, so that you can see fairly deep tissues. In the study itself, they were able to image internal organs in the abdomen of mice. Of course, they had to take the fur off the mice because the fur gets in the way, but the skin itself allowed them to visualize the organs beneath the surface of the skin in a way that just clear water did not do.
But this is temporary, right? Like, this is something
temporary.
that...
Yes, it's temporary. Yeah. It washes off. It goes away. It doesn't last. And so it can be used. The idea is that potentially it can be used to help with visualizing aspects of the body for surgeries, for making invasive procedures less invasive, being able to see stuff that's going on inside that we can't. What uses could we put this to if we could create really, really useful applications? I know there was somebody watching earlier who's involved in GI science. What if we could use yellow dye number 5 instead of having a colonoscopy? No, that's not actually going to happen. But
you have to get that Mountain Dew real deep.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! I'm not going to talk about. I'm not. No Mountain Dew. And the more dye they added when they tested it, the more transparent their scattering became. They were able to see more clearly beneath increasing concentrations of FD&C yellow 5 dye. They were able to visualize more things. So I don't know, maybe there will be more tests in the future, and perhaps we'll be able to balance the dye with different colors of light to be able to see more specifically different tissues and different structures. So just for anatomical stuff, could you imagine going to get your blood drawn and they sanitize and then they put on yellow dye that allows the phlebotomist to actually see your vein? They have no excuse to miss it.
That'd be great. They always have such a hard time with my veins.
I know.
Always.
They have absolutely no excuse. And perhaps there's an ant on my microphone. That's not good. Perhaps this could also, they suggest it could be used for simplifying laser-based tattoo removal, light delivery into deep tissues for photodynamic and photothermal therapies, early detection of skin cancer. There's all sorts of ideas that if light can make it further into the skin, that perhaps we could put lasers into the skin more easily. So lasers, instead of getting refracted and bounced out, would be able to pass through with the use of this dye. So laser therapies, light
fry your organs. Yeah.
Well, if you're trying to go after tumors or do very specific therapies, it kind of make sense. Anyway, yeah, see-through skin, very exciting. And then 2 last stories for this part of the show. We've got stress is bad for sperm, right? Nobody likes stress, especially sperm. Sperm don't like it. They stop swimming as well. They don't find eggs as well. They're not happy. Their motility is down. Researchers just publishing in Nature Communications have found that there is a bounce back. So when you remove the stress, sperm do better. Who knew? Get rid of the stress, and those sperm are happy. They're going to make sure that they're motile, and they're going to make it to the egg. They're going to have great opportunity for fertilizing the eggs. I think the thing that's interesting about this particular study, though, is the stress. It impacts sperm itself And so we have periods of time like during the pandemic when reproduction was down, fertility was down a bit. I mean, we do have our pandemic babies, and everybody was home a lot. But at the same time, now that the pandemic is, people are going back more to normal life, and the stress, quote unquote, has been removed. How is that impacting fertility and male fertility in particular? It's a very, I think, important question. And then beyond that, how does just everyday stress play into this as well? And then finally, from sperm to eggs. As women age, their eggs get older. However, not all of their eggs are older. We have immature old eggs in our ovaries that we can go into menopause and not have released all of our eggs. Researchers in this last study here, they took eggs and they put them, old eggs, and put them into young ovaries. What do you think happened, Blair?
Old eggs in young ovaries.
Yeah.
I really don't know. You're going to have to tell me. I could make a guess in either direction.
Old eggs put in young ovaries regain their youth. It's like, as the researchers
But what
said,
does that mean? Yeah, you got to tell me what that means.
The researchers said it was like sending the old eggs to a spa, like a spa day. They regained their young metabolism. They regained lots of markers for youth and were able to then they took young, immature eggs out of the young ovaries, replaced them with old, immature eggs in the young ovaries. The old, immature eggs were like, woohoo! And they went on to mature and have great babies. Instead of having babies with potential metabolic issues, they had fewer natural miscarriage risks. This is all in mice, mind you, but they did the opposite study. They put young, immature eggs in old ovaries, and those eggs got old. They started acting old. They didn't mature as well. They had metabolic and chromosomal defects. So the environment.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
The cellular environment is part of determining the success of the oocyte.
So that's interesting for a bunch of reasons. One being when you do IVF or when you harvest your eggs and you freeze them, the focus is 100% on the eggs. You want young eggs. You can have a baby when you're 45 with the 20-year-old egg, and it's like you're having a kid when you're 20.
Yeah.
This would indicate that is not true.
Exactly. And so our egg oocyte storage, harvesting and storage for people who want to do IVF when they're older, if we give a better environment for those eggs later, then maybe it could be better for the offspring.
Interesting.
You just put those eggs.
It's not all about the egg.
It's not all about the egg. It's about the environment.
Huh.
It's a system, man. I mean, woman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
person,
human. Ooh, person. I can't say purple. Yeah. This is This Week in Science. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this show. I'm not going to say any more because it's almost time for Blair's Animal Corner. It pretty much is. We're well past it. And my internet, for some reason, keeps going up and down and up and down. So I hope everything's doing great. Thank you for joining us for another episode. If you are not subscribed, please subscribe and hit those notifications so that you know when we are here every single Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And additionally, make sure you head to TWIS.org, click on the Patreon link to help support the show. Become a patron at any level of support that you can. We really, really can't do it without you. Thank you for your support. All right. Let's get Blair back into this show. She's disconnected. She's tired. she needs this. It's good. He's like, no, the energy's coming. Because you know what? It's time for Blair's Animal Corner with Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
There we go. I can't start without that. It's like you're summoning me. So first, a real quick one. I know this is probably all over the internet today, last few days. Cleaner wrasses check their body size in a mirror before deciding whether to fight. So let's talk about it. The cleaner wrasse.
They check their wrasses.
Yes, exactly. The blue streak cleaner wrasse, Labroides dimidiatus, check their body size in a mirror before choosing whether to attack a fish that they are slightly larger or slightly smaller than. Based on what they see, they decide, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And then they fight or they don't. And so there's lots of problems with this, but ultimately we know that cleaner wrasse use mirrors. They know what they look like in a mirror. They recognize that it is them in a mirror. I think we reported on that even on this show.
Yeah, you did. I remember it. Yep.
But where this gets really interesting is, how do you know that that is what they're doing in the mirror? How do you know that they look at the mirror and they go, how big am I? Like, are they looking at their body size in relation to the other fish? Are they looking at both bodies in the mirror to go, who's bigger? Also, the really big question I have here is, what about wrasses that aren't in a laboratory? Do they have something that their body, their image reflects in the wild?
Right. What would they be looking at?
So
hubcaps
this
we
is a
threw
really
into
interesting thing that wrasses are doing in captivity.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really tell us much about their behavior in the wild. Like before, when they were using the mirror to say they recognize themselves, researchers use that as a classic, this animal has a sense of self test, which we have talked also about, like, is that appropriate, or do we just test animals the way that our brains work and they're human bias tests, and do they even really do anything? But ultimately, that's the motivation behind giving them a mirror, is to test what's going on in their brain. In this moment, there's a qualifier being put on it that they are using the mirror as a tool to assess whether it is advantageous for them to fight another individual or not. So aside from like trying to like, how do we know that's what they're doing in the mirror? How do we know they're not going into the mirror to psych themselves up or to see if there's somebody to help them? Oh, nope, that's my reflection. That's not a buddy. You know, there could be lots of reasons for them to be doing that. But also, ultimately, the why of this study is what really bothers me, because knowing whether an animal has a sense of self impacts our basic understanding of their brain, of their behavior, and of their general intelligence. But figuring out if they can like use a mirror in a lab, I have a harder time seeing what the application of that knowledge would be.
Right. I mean, the first question is, why? Okay, we have a wrasse, this animal that goes up to challenge against other animals all the time. Mm-hmm. And that seeing another animal and understanding the size is going to give a sense of success or not success, right? So, like you said, is looking in the mirror. We've kind of learned that these wrasses are able to know that it's them, I guess, or however they're behaving suggests it's them, but we don't know that. And so I think that's still the big question. That's the big question, because, okay, say you're small. You're just going to look at yourself as small. Do you see the reflection of other fish in the mirror as well as you're looking at yourself in the mirror? And then you go,
comparing yourself to. Mm-hmm.
Right. So are you actually comparing is the wrasse comparing themselves, psyching themselves up and going, yeah, you can do it. That guy's bigger. No, you're not going to do it. Or is the wrasse going, this thing I see in the mirror is smaller than that over there. That's not a good, is it just what is seen and not actually
right? Which then how do you gauge relative size? That almost seems harder than seeing yourself in a mirror, being able to gauge relative size. I see this in a mirror. I see this in real life. Which one is big?
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard. I don't know if I could do that.
No, we know parallax is a real issue for people all the time. People are like, ooh, perception is messed up all the time. We think something's bigger than it is. And
yeah. So anyway, I mean, the study really ran with this question about the cleaner wrasse using the mirror. But I think there's a lot of questions that I'd want before that. For example, is there something in the wild that these fish would use to see their reflection in? Because it's hard for me to imagine what that would be.
What is what would you be using? Where are there mirrors underwater?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, even if not, is there an advantage? Do they win more fights if they have a mirror in their tank with them? That's the question, right? Like, is it actually helping?
They didn't look at that in this study. Because did it affect their decision making?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it affected their decision making, but I don't know if they took that next step of like, did it help?
Right. Because that's what you would hope, right? If you are aware and you're like, I'm smaller compared to that guy, I shouldn't do that. Or I'm bigger.
Yeah.
And then, does it actually make a difference? I mean, you would hope that was
I don't know.
Involved.
I don't know. Anyway, seems very, very strange.
It seems like there's more data that needs to be pulled out, and this, they're publishing on this stuff, and that's great, which is, they're showing their work, but at the same time, there's a lot more investigation that has to occur here.
Right. Yes. And then my last story for tonight is all about Alan. Artificial light at night.
Alan.
Hi, Alan. Always messing stuff up. Tonight, Alan, he's shrinking spiders' brains.
What?
Yeah.
Damn it, Alan. Okay, what?
Yeah. Yeah. So in Australia, also here, I have some orb weavers right here, but in Australia, they studied some orb weavers, Australian garden orb weavers. Orb weavers are cool because they make these really intricate webs. A lot of them will tear them down and make them again so that they're extra see-through, so that they're so clean that you can walk face first into one, although that's not the intention. The intention is to catch more bugs. But anyway, orb weavers, very common in urban environments. They've really adapted to live around humans. And in this case, they've actually adapted to build their I was going to say nets, their webs. It's getting late for me. They built their webs.
Spider nets.
Under spider nets, exactly. Under street lights because it attracts bugs. So these orb weavers actually eat much better under Alan than in the wild. But apparently it also shrinks their brain. So...
Because they don't have to work as hard, right?
Great question. So there's a few theories. This is one of those studies where they confirmed impact, but not the reason behind, like not the actual mechanism. So I'll get there in a second. But so what they did is they took late juvenile spiders from dark parks in Melbourne, Australia, and they reared them in a laboratory until they were adults. And during rearing, half the spiders were under darkness at night, and the other half had nocturnal lighting equivalent to the brightness of a streetlight, where these orb weavers often make these spider nets.
Spider nets.
A few weeks after the spiders were grown, they looked at the brain development. So the brain of a spider is about the size of the nib of a ballpoint pen, less than a cubic millimeter. So they used micro CT imaging to visualize what was inside. They found not just generally that their brains were smaller, but that specific sections of their brain were smaller. The short-term exposure to light at night, overall smaller brain volumes, but the strongest effect area was in the area of the brain linked to vision in the spider's primary eyes. So a couple of theories.
It's easier to see.
It's easier to see, so they don't need as much brain power to see in the dark. The other one would be they don't hunt by vision, they hunt by touch. So they don't need to see. So stressors on their body by their circadian rhythms being disrupted and otherwise just being exposed to artificial light at night, their body had to cut corners somewhere, and they cut vision because vision was not necessary to their survival.
You're basically saying that light led to depressed spiders, and that it's like brain shrinking.
Right. Yeah. So of course there's other examples of this, like there are desert ants that show similar shifts in their they're called neuroplastic shifts in the visual center of their brain when they move from subterranean to above ground vision-based foraging. So this has been seen in other invertebrates where not only their brain shrinks, but specifically this part of their brain shrinks when they're exposed to light at night. So obviously this is important for a bunch of reasons, especially in Australia where there's just so many bugs. Having less spiders is actually a bad thing, even though that's all you picture when you think about Australia is just spiders and snakes. But having less spiders is actually a huge problem because then you don't have controls on smaller invertebrates, flying animals, flying insects, like all this kind of stuff. So
in Australia, they are flying animals. Yeah.
Yeah, they are flying animals. They're specifically flying insects, but yes, they're also important prey for predators like birds and lizards, which obviously there's a million of in Australia as well. And so this is an impact because if these spiders ultimately not only are their brains smaller, but their entire bodies are smaller, it's almost like a boom and bust situation. So because they get so many bugs under the streetlight, they grow very fast, very quickly, they grow very big, very quickly in terms of kind of the overall growth pattern, but then they stop short of where these orb weavers normally get to. Yes. So it's a boom and bust. They grow really fast and then they stop short of the normal orb weaver size.
So not to put insect brains on any morphological correlation with mammalian brains, but we know that body size and brain size are correlated in mammals. There is a ratio that is pretty consistent. Like you're going to be this big. Oh, okay. Your brain's going to be this big. Smaller animals, smaller brain size. And so it's when we have the small animal, big brain. That's where people go, oh, it's interesting. Hey, humans, you're big, but you're not that big and your brain's pretty big. Oh, hey. So there's a couple of interesting things that you've said here where perhaps the brain is smaller because the body's smaller. Perhaps the brain is smaller because the sensory aspect isn't as necessary because they have light and they don't even need lots of visual brain area because it's easy to see. So they don't have to have all sorts of processing. So they don't have to have as much sensory. They don't have to have as much visual because it's bright. And they have all the stuff they want. It's easy. Maybe it all ties in together, but maybe it doesn't.
It could all be related, yeah. But ultimately, Alan, bad once again.
Alan, stop it. Don't touch my spiders. I want them to be as big as they can be. I want their brains to be. I want big spider brains. Big spiders.
Orb weavers in particular, man, they're just always near your face.
They are. There is something about the height that they usually choose to put their webs overnight, so that first thing in the morning when you come out your door, it's right there. Always across a path, always in your face. But they're beautiful. Orb weavers, amazing spiders. Oh, the spiders. Alan, stop it. Moving on from spider brains, I could talk about human brains, but first I really need to share this interesting story with you about Japanese eels, Blair. Researchers published their work this last week into Japanese eels that are little eels that get eaten by fish. So this little eel species gets eaten by the fish, and you'd think, hey, eel goes in the stomach, gets digested. It's great. And there's like this wonderful figure that like the top is death, right? That's what happens to the eel, right? Not always. No. Some eels.
Am I looking at brain eels right now?
Nope, not brain eels. The eels go into the stomach. They turn themselves around, and then they decide to stick their tail back out, and they find their way out of the fish through the gills. Then they swim away.
Through the gills?
Escape. It is an option. Escape.
Wow.
Through the gills. The tail goes out first. So it's tail side first. The head comes out last. But in many cases, at least a good third, the eel is able to escape its predator through the gills and avoid death. It's not certain.
Wow.
No, it's not. They did imaging where they were able to, and it wasn't involving yellow dye number 5 at all, but they imaged these fish and the eels and were able to take videos of the entire process of these eels turning themselves around. Oh,
you know what this reminds me of? The beginning of the show where you talked about making it space inside. It's seawater inside.
It is. Open it up and get out of there.
They're like, I'm just gonna go. Is that all right? Wow.
Yeah. So it really is like, I think it's an amazing adaptation, and it's fascinating that some of these Japanese eels are able to find their way out and escape from the stomach. And I'm trying to find, I'm trying to do a video, but it's a pop out. Ooh, not a Chrome tab. There it is. I found it. Media player. So we can now see the escaping behavior of Japanese eels, Anguilla japonica. So we have the otolith, which is a sensing organ, the banner swim bladder, japonica is captured by the fish. Chomp, 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 chomp. The fish chomps it up. Oh, there goes the eel right down the esophagus into the fishy tummy. Nope. Okay, I'm going to turn myself around. Doop, doop. I love how in this video, they do a great job of circling things and pointing things out for you. So it's like, here it is in the belly. Here's its tail. And it's going to just go right back out there. Right out the esophagus. And we're going to get it right up. Yep, getting up. It's like threading a needle. His little tiny eel tail has decided to find a way out. It's just going to push its way out. And it starts to poke its way. Oh, Hey, honey, you're poking out. There it goes. Little eel tail sticking out. Tail emerges from the predator's gill opening. This is wonderful. Wow. And off it goes. Here it goes. The japonica uses its tail to push against the body wall of the fish and pull its head out of the gill so it can swim away from the predator.
Wow.
Isn't nature great?
That poor fish too. Like, oh man,
that fish is not dead, and the fish is hungry. The fish is confused. Maybe it was uncomfortable for a moment. It's fine.
But really, like,
everybody's great.
I just ate. Why am I hungry?
I don't know.
Wow. Wow. Good job.
Might have done an escaping act. Yes. It really is. These eels are the hairy Houdini of the fish world.
Kiki, tell me more about brains.
Dinnerini. Yes. Okay. So I've got 2 stories to finish up the show, tell you some brains. So do you ever have cravings for things, like for me to finish the show?
I'm always craving something.
Right? You're craving something. You're like, why am I craving this? Oh my gosh, I want it so bad. And like, what's happening in your brain while that's happening? When you're feeling craving, what is happening in your brain? If we could take a snapshot of it, what would be going on there? I'm going to tell you about that in a minute and leave you craving that story. In the meantime, we're going to talk about some new work that researchers just published in Nature Communications about basically anatomy of consciousness, which to me is really, really cool. So in this study, they looked at the brain, imaged the brain while people were in a brain imager, right? And they were able to come up with an understanding of connections between various areas of the brain and individuals under sedation with propofol or not. So this last spring, and many people may have, this last spring, my son went to the hospital, had to be put under with propofol. Bam. He didn't know what was happening, became unconscious in terms of his awareness, and then he was out, like just out like a light. How did that happen? What was happening in his brain? Well, these researchers tested this on a bunch of people. They determined that in your thalamus, the thalamus is a very central part of your brain to information processing, and is basically, you have the cortex on the outside. That's all your higher function and thinking. And the thalamus is like your old brain, the ancient brain in the middle. They determined that there are a set of cells that turn off. They call them matrix cells because they take you out of the matrix. So when you are given propofol and you become unconscious, these matrix cells become quiet. They lose their connection to higher cerebral cortex cells. And all that's left are what they call the core cells. This is like the just basic cells that are working. And it fully syncs with consciousness and unconsciousness cell types that are active or not active, and propofol being involved. So if you want to be unconscious, these cells going to sleep is part of it. This is one of the first times that we've been able to actually come up with a schematic anatomical representation of what cells and what parts of the brain go to sleep and are responsible for our consciousness. The matrix cells. I think the name is appropriate.
Being asleep and being sedated the same thing?
No, they're not, because but it would be because what happens with the brain, there are different cells that are active and parts of the brain are kind of shut down, but there are networks that become active, especially during REM sleep. Right. There's different activation.
But you said that this was people on propofol, right? So these are people who were sedated.
Mm-hmm.
So it is. So we use the word unconscious for both, but this study was specifically looking at sedated.
Yes. One of the and one of the interesting aspects of this, what they call the core matrix, functional core matrix architecture of the thalamus. The thalamus is absolutely part of our sleep cycles. We've got a bunch of like lower brain, midbrain areas that are involved in the information, but there's and certain cells do have to be shut down for sleep to occur. And so it probably is involved, but this is something that they were able to show specifically with propofol. And because they knew they were controlling it, as opposed to people just falling asleep and not being something that was controlled experimentally.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's not like a nucleus, but these are subtypes of cells. So it's these matrix cells, which can be distributed throughout the thalamus and not just in one particular nuclei of the thalamus. So it's not like spatially oriented in the thalamus. It's like distributed all over. It's just certain cells that are like, good night, I want to go to bed now. Yeah. But this specifically, they're able to say this anesthesia, this is how it works. They probably need to look a little more deeply when it comes to sleep and what we get from that. Have you been craving my last story ever since I introduced it?
Give me.
So it's actually a very simple study and I mean, not simple to do, but published in Molecular Psychiatry. These researchers at Yale School of Medicine wanted to investigate whether people who experience stronger cravings engage and stay in certain brain networks more than people with less craving. So the craving network, like, the dopamine reinforcement and having, those reinforcing networks continuing versus not. So they used fMRI images and craving scores from individuals. They had individuals, 425 participants who had alcohol use disorder, cocaine use disorder, prenatal cocaine exposure, or obesity. And they were underwent functional magnetic resonance imaging while viewing landscapes, relaxing situations, things that are neutral. And then the researchers said, hey, how much do you crave alcohol, cocaine, or food right now? On a scale of no craving to strong craving. And so basically they're like, hey, you're not craving. Suddenly I'm going to remind you of this thing. Are you craving now? And how does that feel? What's happening? Anyway, they found two networks, stronger craving network. And anyway, people craving more stuff had more of a craving network activation than people who weren't craving stuff.
Sure.
Just so you know.
The craving network controls craving.
Yes.
And responds to craving. Got it.
Yes.
If I say craving 5 more times, will we lose the meaning of the word?
Craving. I'm craving more signs. So as they say, they're positive craving network. And then also the weaker craving is the negative craving network. And the positive network state was more sticky during craving. And that negative craving network just really wasn't active. And so for future work, what researchers are going to try and figure out is how do you get individuals who are stuck in a positive reinforcement craving neural cycle to get out of it? So for instance, if you're trying to not be addicted to a substance, people say, get rid of all your alcohol in your house so you don't see it. Don't go around the people. Don't be in the situations, don't hear anybody say these words, whatever. Yeah. So what can we do neurally? How can we help people to retrain their brains so that negative craving network is activated more often than the positive craving network. Are there drugs that are involved, or are there actually cognitive behavioral training things that we can do? I know we're craving some sleep right now, so maybe those matrix cells will be going to bed. I don't know. But I know that craving network. It is strong with Blair. Thank you. Wait, we've done it, right, Blair? I'm not going to keep you up anymore, right?
Yeah. No, we're done.
Yeah. I just wanted to check. Everyone, thank you for joining us.
With or without you in a minute.
I know. I'm watching you. I see your heavy-lidded eyes. There, you're holding yourself up by your hands right now. So it is time. It is time, everyone, for us to call it a night. Thank you, Blair, for joining us for this episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. All of you in the chat rooms, thank you for being here and chatting, having fun while we discussed all these stories. Fada, thank you so much for your work in show notes and social media. It's very incredibly helpful. I can't do it without you. Gord, Arnlore, others who keep the chat room safe, thank you for doing that. Identity4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, thank you so much for editing the show. And of course, gotta thank our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Bad, Bob Coles, Kent Northcote, George Corris, Pierre Velazab, John Ratnaswamy, Chris Wozniak, Vegard Chefstad, Jonathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Reagan Shubru, Sarah Forfard, Don Mundus, PIG, Stephen Alvaron, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swanson, Fred S104, Skyluke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, Jubert and Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Grudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul Phillips, Shane, Kurt Lerston, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, Lawn Makes, E.O., Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, David Similarly, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Yay! Thank you so much for your support on Patreon. You really do help keep this show going. And if anybody else wants to be a part of our Patreon community, head over to twis.org and click on the Patreon link. On next week's show, Blair!
We'll be back on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels.
And if you want to listen to us as a podcast, just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. And if you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe too.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website. That's at www.twis.org. You can also sign up for a newsletter.
We do love your feedback, and if there's a topic you'd like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, please let us know on one of our social media accounts or send us an email. We love those. Just make sure that you put TWIS in the subject line so your email doesn't get spam filtered into Blair.
An orb weaver web spider net.
Spider net. Yeah, because it's a spider net. We'll never find it.
We look forward to discussing science with you again next week. And if you learned anything from the show tonight, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 science.